The show is strictly for educational purposes. The opinions expressed on the show are personal to the individuals appearing in the show and not those of Thinking Tree Ecoholics Private Limited. The show is not intended to offend or defame any individual, entity, caste, community, race, or religion, or to denigrate any institution, person, living or dead. Listener discretion is strongly advised.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Ecoholics, the Thinking Tree series, a talk show where we invite intellectuals and professionals to talk and discuss about various economic concepts and economic issues. Today we are going to discuss on game theory and its application, and we have a very special guest with us today. We have with us Professor Dr. Viswanath Pingali, and he is Associate Professor at the prestigious Indian Institute of Management, Ahmedabad. We welcome you, sir, and it's a pleasure to have you here with us today.
Oh, thank you very much for such glowing terms. Yes, I do pretend to teach economics at Indian Institute of Management, Ahmedabad, and I must also compliment you for getting my last name right. Nice.
Thanks.
Sure. Yeah.
Right. Thank you so much for that. Now, sir, moving on to our topic of today, that is game theory and its application. So, my first question is a very curious one that pops up in my mind is that according to your expertise and experience, you must find applied econometrics as a very integral and significant part of microeconomics. But on the other hand, we have a vast view, or let's say we have a large base of students who still do not learn econometrics or take econometrics as an optional subject. So could you just throw some light on the importance and significance of applied econometrics in especially the role, especially its role in microeconomics and in higher studies of economics?
Sure. Thanks. It's a very interesting question, and you're starting the first one itself with a very, how do I put it, a very controversial tone, if you will, right? So let's just put it this way: when students study microeconomics, we make a lot of theoretical predictions. But that's exactly what it is. It is theoretical predictions. Do we actually see that kind of a thing happening in the market out there? Are we really certain that that's exactly what we see in the market and that our theory is robust in explaining the world out there? That's where I think empirics matter a lot. Let me give you an example that I give to many of my students in order to understand this very carefully. Imagine you want to look at purchasing habits of people for basmati rice, right? In your mind, you went and you decided that if you reduce the price of a basmati rice brand, the consumption increases. That's something very simple. Any theoretical first year microeconomics student will tell you. Now you go to the market. Imagine that you decided to do your analysis. You take a small stool, set yourself up in one of the departmental stores all over, anywhere in the country. And at 11 o'clock on Sunday, you go to the market and you look at the aisle. You see that the price is 80 rupees. And you list the number of people who have purchased it. Next day, for some reason, the shop has increased the price to 95 rupees. On a Monday morning at 9 o'clock, you show up at the departmental store and you record the number of people who purchased it at, let me step back. The price reduced from 80 rupees to 60 rupees.
Okay.
And on a Monday morning at 11 o'clock, at 9 o'clock, you went to the shop to figure out how many people are buying India Gate, and you figured out basmati rice, and you figure out that very few people. Then you draw both these lines and say, oh no, my teacher has taught me something
wrong.
The price actually goes down. Quantity goes down too. So that's where econometrics comes into the picture. You would have realized essentially that you're talking about something called day fixed effects or some such very fancy econometrics term, and then it starts making sense. The theory that was taught in the class is not wrong. The theory is absolutely right. But then again, at the same time, let's just imagine a luxurious good whose price slashes by 90%. You'll be looking for spelling mistakes in the product's name, actually, in the brand's name, actually, and you're not necessarily going to take the theory that you're taught in the class very seriously. So here is where I believe that in a microeconomics class, the role of econometrics becomes extremely critical You need to be able to understand the theory and understand how the data either proves or disproves, or what is the tweak to the theory you need before you form an implementable strategy out of that particular insight. That's my take on why econometrics is more or less an integral part of
Right.
microeconomics classes nowadays.
Right.
I hope I answered your
Absolutely.
question.
Absolutely, sir. And another thing that actually is very, I find it curious is what is the level? It's a very generic question, although, but on at what level the student should be taught econometrics? Because now that we have econometrics in graduation level also in universities across India, we are talking about different cities and towns which earlier did not have those courses, especially of econometrics, integrated with microeconomics. So, is it really important that the theory should be taught first, and then we can go to the empirical part, or is it something that the student should or can understand if the basics are taught at a very junior preliminary levels? What is your take?
Savali, you are thinking about economics as a subject which is divided into subparts. I don't
Mhm.
think that way. I think economics
Perfect.
is a subject which tells you a little bit about how the world around you reacts to certain
Right.
conditions. So, right. So, therefore, when
Yes.
you look at it that way, this entire argument of distinction between theory and empirics just vanishes. In my opinion, actually, both of
Absolutely.
them should be taught very carefully.
Hmm.
Okay, I think both of them have to be taught very, very, jointly and together. In
Hmm.
fact, actually, I don't believe that there are two distinct things. I mean, that's why I'm a great advocate that, econometrics and microeconomics, and to a certain degree, macroeconomics, all three of them actually move hand in hand in hand. I mean, several of the questions I get in my class are always about data. In a pure theory class that I'm teaching, people question me about data. And in a pure microeconomics class, as we think about, people question me about topics like inflation and the universal basic income and all kinds of cash transfer versus subsidies. So many questions which are at a macro policy making perspective, and then they will talk about about the second order effects and all that stuff. It's very, to me, therefore, this entire argument that there is a distinct line I can draw and say, this side of the line is microeconomics and this side of the pie is
Right.
econometrics, this pie of the is macroeconomics. I don't think
Yeah.
that's
It's a
something that
delusional
we
statement.
can. I mean, I understand that I specialize in micro market structure and therefore I teach microeconomics as a subject. But to me, I need to know a little bit of everything, and I think
Yep.
all three subjects have to grow together in a student's mind. I mean, of course, you're going to specialize in one such domain, but
Right.
ultimately, at a teaching level, I believe that you'll have to grow together across all the three subjects. Yeah.
Absolutely. So that's actually quite insightful that you have stated, because most of the time when the questions are asked by the students, they think that these courses are totally different, and that's why they do not integrate anywhere. And the way most of the time the teaching happens also is this apart, international is different, this is different, public finance is different. So of course this is a very insightful thing that you have given
Let
right
me
now.
add one small point so that this is meant for students. I'll assume this
Yes,
talk is
of
for
course.
students. So therefore, let me address them directly and give them a piece of advice which I learned in a very hard way. Right.
Yes.
So during my masters, I hated macroeconomics. I'll be very clear. I mean, during my bachelor's days and during my master's days, I simply didn't understand the subject. Not that I claim to understand it now, I don't. But nonetheless, I just hated it. And
Right.
when I went for my PhD, I had the same view.
Hmm.
Somehow, the few courses I have to do for macroeconomics, which my university, insisted, I forced myself to do that, and that's where my relationship with macro ended. Now, in certain research questions that I actually work on,
Hmm.
I knew that day where I decided that macroeconomics is something that I'm not going to touch, because so many times the large, big picture effect,
Yeah.
the way some of my friends are able to predict and move on, I'm not able to do it. And in fact, actually, there's a research paper I'm currently working on which talks about
Mhm.
macro impact of something which is taught in micro class, which is healthcare strategy. So
Right.
you know I think to me, in my mind, I'm very clear. Don't have those kinds of prejudices. I
Mm.
think all three subjects are very, very, very important. Yes, you may like one aspect of it, but keep an open mind till the last possible minute about variety of things. They're not different. They're all together. You're not
Yeah.
making macro policy without understanding how micro level changes happen, and micro level
Happen.
changes are not independent of macro level changes, and so on and so forth. Yeah, sorry. Go ahead.
Totally, 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 absolutely. Now, moving on to the topic of the discussion about game theory. So game theories in most cases, or in most A-level courses, as we talk, um, it is sidelined because of the complex nature, or probably because of its tricky nature. I would not say complex in a certain way, but yes, tricky in a conceptual way of understanding. But also, although the students might find it a little difficult at the preliminary stage, but if there's a lot of specialization done, research done, or teaching done in this particular arena, probably students might find it a little interesting. In this context, sir, I would like to ask you what made you, turn to this welfare economics, game theory, and this area of microeconomics. What
Sure.
made you, and what fascinated you to this arena of microeconomics?
Right. So I always liked maths, right? I mean, in my undergrad too, my specialization, my honors was in economics, but I had very strong background in stats and mathematics. Even in my 11th and 12th, I did economics and maths together. So I always
Yeah,
liked maths.
yeah.
So the fact that I like microeconomics and the fact that within that I like game theory was
Mhm.
obvious. And I think during my master's days at Indian Statistical Institute in Calcutta, I was very clear that I wanted to do a PhD in game theory. But then let me also make it very clear to you, I'm not a game theorist. I'm not even remotely a game theorist. What I know is that I have working knowledge of game theory and I find it very fascinating. I have enough
Fascinating.
knowledge of game theory to understand pretty
True.
much most of the things around. And what I find very interesting about that subject is that it tells you why
Mhm.
people behave the way they behave.
Yeah.
And more importantly, be it and it has an interdisciplinary appeal, which I love.
Mhm.
So, in my game theory class, to say that it is an economics class would be a misnomer. We discuss poetry, we discuss, sorry, poetry is too much of a stretch, but some elements of it, yes. But politics, we discuss a lot of politics, we discuss a lot of evolutionary biology, we discuss so many things where I actually feel, live games as well,
Mhm.
where I feel that, the ability for you to understand the world
Mhm.
improves with the knowledge of game theory. I mean, I can understand why people are scared of game theory because the way it is being made to look at,
Yeah.
it's like a very mathematical, very technical set of subjects where you're proving a series of theorems.
Yeah.
And many people might say, "Ye meri bas ki baat nahi hai. Why I don't want maths and all that stuff." But trust me when I say this. I think there are ways to learn game theory, and there are ways to think about game theory without it necessarily being technical. Technical is being used synonymously here as mathematical. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
No, I think let's just be very clear about one thing. We know that there is a particular, we can put in certain set of assumptions on how individuals behave. We are seeing some outcomes out there. Okay, can we actually, using the way human beings behave, explain the outcome we are looking at in the society? To me,
Mhm.
that's, and therefore, is there a certain pattern that will emerge which will allow us to do further discerning of how things are going to unfold? To me, this is what game theory does as a subject. Can it be taught mathematically? Of course, it can be taught mathematically. It's a lot more simple to teach it mathematically. But can it be taught intuitively? As far as I see it, I think it can be taught quite beautifully intuitively. That's what we end up doing in most of the classes. There's another, branch of economics which has to be combined with game theory if you're ever studying. It's called behavioral economics. There's a lot of experiments that are going on people. There are lots of, on human subjects, if I may say so. And human subject testing is not just restricted to biology anymore. Marketers do it
Right.
all the time. Economists do it all the time. Um, this is where I find game theory to be fascinating. You have a, ought to behavior that classroom teaches.
Mhm.
You have a behavior that you observe in the real life. Can you draw parallels between both of them and establish new insights into how people behave and therefore take an appropriate strategy from your firm's perspective? To me, that is the reason why I find game theory to be fascinating. But let me make it very clear to you and your viewers. I teach game theory because I have fairly good working knowledge of the subject. I am not a game theorist, as a researcher. I consider myself as an industrial organization researcher, which is nothing but applied game theory in some sense.
Right.
That's my experience in game theory, to be very clear. Yep.
Yeah. Actually, it's very fascinating to know about your interest, and because this topic or this concept is not much touched upon by many people, many economists. Although it.
Game theory, I would actually beg to disagree with you. I think
Yeah.
in the current knowledge, I think almost everyone's talking game theory without necessarily knowing that they're talking game theory. Almost pretty much everyone's
That's
talking about.
that's a correct point.
Again, I mean, I really don't know. We are talking about how people behave, yeah. So, but pretty much anything that talks about people behaving, responding to incentives.
Yeah.
Well, that is game theory, in my opinion. So, therefore, it's tautological that people are talking game theory. It's not necessarily true that they know that they're talking about game theory, right? I mean, they're not
Yeah.
necessarily calling it Nash equilibrium, but that's exactly what it is,
Right.
right? Yeah,
Absolutely. Right. And also because I believe that game theory and its application is also there in various parts of management, and like you said, corporate world uses it a lot in many of the, I think, incentives, and what do you call, the PPAs and everything is also based on
yeah,
how corporates and the structure behaves. So I think that's a quite an interesting area.
sure.
Now, another very interesting and a very curious question that pops in my mind is about a very abstract topic that I found also when I was researching about you, a few of the working papers that you have also made. I found ethics and the integration of ethics and game theory, or ethics and how people behave, what is morally correct and how is it economically correct. So how can we integrate this two? Do we need to find some moral solution to a particular problem over here, or are we just confusing between something which is a normative side of science and something very abstract, and then trying to empirically find out through game theory and different types of applications of it, a particular solution, like I found in your working paper about investors ethics. And then I read a lot of articles and papers on producers ethics and consumers ethics, and there's so many articles written about different ethics. Now, how do we translate this?
Yeah.
I
So
would
I'll
like to
be, I'll be very. I'll come up with a confession here. When I was looking at the list of questions that you guys have sent me,
yeah.
I penciled out this question and I said I should let you guys know before the talk itself not to ask me this particular question because I'm very not sure. But nonetheless, I think I forgot, and maybe it's a good thing that I forgot. So therefore, I'm going to give you a very natural answer for this.
Yes, of
The
course.
moment you started touching upon ethics, I completely was like, oh my god, I should have done that, but I didn't do it. And since then, I was thinking about what answer I would give you for this. But let me put it this way. Um, I don't pretend to teach ethics at all. I had worked a little bit on ethical behavior of investors and ethical
Yeah.
behavior of companies,
Right.
especially in the context of the subject that I like most, which is
Right.
cricket. Right.
Oh.
I mean, I have also another confession to make. I actually watched entire England West Indies Test match, first Test match, without missing much of it because that's how I love it, and I'm
Yeah.
missing it terribly. But anyway, so if there is a place where I could combine research with cricket, that was yes, gung ho moment for me. Paper
Yeah.
also got published recently.
Right.
Um, right. So, nonetheless, I don't pretend to teach ethics at all. And in the class, I do take a perspective. I'm not saying that that's my personal view. In the class, I take a particular position, and I think it's important for me as a teacher to take certain positions in the class, which are not necessarily
Absolutely.
what I believe in. right? In the class, I take a particular position that human beings, by definition, are going to be selfish, and therefore they are going to react to a particular way. Is that necessarily true? I'll leave it to individual reader to think about. Okay, I'm an
Right.
individual listener to think about. I don't
Absolutely.
necessarily, agree with it nor disagree with it. Individuals are selfish, so selfish behavior will drive a certain kind of a behavior. So, to me, therefore, if you're if you're a person who is designing a particular system, you'll assume that based on the rules you set for the game, people are going to behave in a particular way.
True.
Correct? So, therefore, the question is there is something called social objective and there's something called individual objective.
Perfect.
As a social planner, if you will, such a term doesn't exist in reality, but nonetheless, as humor me here, as a social planner, your goal is to achieve what is called as common good. As an individual, social good, right? I mean, as an individual, your goal is to do what is good for you at an individual level. So, therefore, how do I design a mechanism where what is good for society automatically becomes what is good for you? So that to me is one of the fundamental problems that I think game theorists have solved over ages. It's called mechanism design. That becomes an integral part of the course for me as well. There are, again, I mean, probably if there's one branch of game theory that I'll have to pick, which is highly technical, that's mechanism design. But nonetheless, there are ways to deal with it in a very intuitive, non-technical way. But I think, to me, the ethical behavior comes from the point of view. So I actually go in the class, I take a particular position that ethical behavior has got to be an outcome of a certain selfish behavior, ultimately. So how do you create an incentive? How do you create a system wherein you being selfless or ethical becomes your most selfish policy? So that's a view I actually take, and therefore would force the students to think about various ways in which this kind of congruence can be achieved. It's called incentives matching kind of a story. How do I make sure that your personal behavior is in sync with what is society expected out of you, because you're going to behave based on your personal incentives? That's my take on that's my let's say subject matter take on ethics. Of course, at a personal level, I do have my views, which is what I'm not an expert on, so therefore I will not get into that. But I do hope I have answered your question.
I believe, as students and learners of economics, we can also take it as a common assumption that we have in, I believe, every theory, that the consumer or a person who's consuming any commodity is a rational consumer. So this rationality depends can depend on a certain type of perspective that a consumer would have or a person would have, and can then the ethics of that person, be him or her, a consumer or producer or investor or anybody, um, react or behave in a certain way. So I think
I
that
would argue this that this entire argument of rational individual, rational customer, I'm still trying to find him or her. As of now, I've not managed to. And my search, I'm assuming, will remain very elusive for foreseeable future. So therefore, I don't actually necessarily look at it that way at all. That's why I said, one of my other areas of interest as far as research is concerned, which is burgeoning right now. I do have one or two papers in this field that I'm working on, is behavioral economics. That's where I actually believe that there's a rationality assumption that is being questioned as well. So therefore, this entire argument of a certain perspective, certain type of a person behaving rationally, certain type of person not behaving rationally, that's not something that I would actually be comfortable in endorsing in every sense of the word. When you start experimenting with people, you'll realize that all assumptions about rationality are wrong, and that almost every pattern that you thought would expect would exhibit rational behavior is also wrong. You see irrational behavior across all walks of life, across all kinds of people, across all education levels, across all income levels.
Yeah.
pretty much everywhere. So
Yeah.
therefore, assuming a particular kind of ethics and tying it up with rationality, I am
Can be
not
risky.
necessarily sure I'm comfortable with in
Mm-hmm.
making. I would say that these are two entirely different things.
Right. Mm.
And I think the whole argument would be that I would always say, don't expect people to be selfless. Figure out
Mm.
how selfish people would behave in a nice way for you. I mean, that's, I think, the whole
That's
argument, right?
right. Right. Pareto efficient solution is one where the players cannot in any way improve their current payoffs through a different action choice without reducing others' payoffs. Now, in this context, sir, if we take environment as public good, and I myself, I'm researching a lot about environment, and nowadays because there are a lot of environmentalists and activists who have come up and who are researching about environmental economics. This is in context of that. If we take environment as public good, how can we find Pareto efficiency? And of course, I'm not asking any solution to it. I'm just asking about the steps. How can we reach to a certain stage where we can find the Pareto efficiency, especially during the overexhaustion of the natural resources, or when we have something like environmental degradation? Because there are concepts like environmental Kuznets curve, then we have a lot of other tragedy of commons, and these are different concepts that are already given. But in reality, if we talk about Pareto efficiency, then that kind of ideal state, I don't think we have achieved yet as in a policy. So, what is your take on that, sir?
Again, environment is something that I don't research a lot on. I've actually researched nothing on as far as environment is concerned. I do a lot on financial inclusion, but not much on environment and other topics. So therefore,
Yeah.
my guess at this point in time is as good as anybody's guess.
Okay.
But is Pareto, a better is a Pareto efficient outcome possible in an environment debate right now?
Mm-hmm.
My limited view would be that it is not. Somebody has to got to lose out if you have to protect environment. So therefore, the question is, who is going to lose out and by how much, and whether the
Mm-hmm.
loss as an economic level at an economic level
Mm-hmm.
is sustainable. I mean, you stop fishing, somebody is going to somebody is going to have problems. Correct? You stop cutting down the forests, somebody else is going to have a problem. So therefore, the
Right.
concept of Pareto efficiency, Pareto optimality, probably is an oxymoron in this particular
Okay.
debate. I think the whole argument is who loses and by how much will this person lose, and in what
Yes.
way can the society, I would go over with the transfers. In what way can the society transfer certain amount of resources to the group that is suffering,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
You're not going to have so that the net social welfare will actually improve.
Right. Right. Right.
The classic argument that one sees. I mean, you have a dam.
Hmm.
Well, cities benefit because they're going to have water, but then yes, I mean there are going to be a few other people who are going to probably lose their livelihood. The
Rehabilitate.
environment is going to suffer. If you don't have dams, I think these group of individuals will also have
Suffer.
problems. So therefore, I'm not taking a view on whether dams should exist or not. I don't think I have a view
Of
on that,
course.
to be
Of
honest.
course. Hmm.
But I think to be argued, to come back to the original point I'm trying to make, Pareto efficiency is probably not something that, even as a remote framework that I would think of. What
Hmm.
is the cost? Is there a way in which we can ethically, morally,
Hmm.
at a societal level? I mean, this is not the expert in me talking. This is really a person in me talking, right?
Of course.
Morally, ethically compensate the
Hmm.
loss that the group that is going to suffer.
Hmm.
Uh, if because of a particular action, how can we compensate them,
Hmm.
which is fair and which is acceptable to all the parties?
Hmm.
So, is there a win-win that you're talking about? Is probably a better approach to this particular problem that we're talking
Right.
about, and
Right.
not necessarily Pareto efficiency and Pareto optimality. To me, I
Right.
don't think that's something that I'll be remotely comfortable with in talking about.
Right. 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 Absolutely. I believe that's a correct way to answer, or let's say approach to a certain this type of question, because I mean, this is a question that generally comes in everybody's minds who would,
Yeah.
go across researching about environmental economics and um, uh, concluding with a certain negativity that, oh, there is no Pareto optimality. But yes, of course, yeah,
I must
that
be
is.
clear again that when I'm talking about environment, I'm not necessarily talking about it from the expert point of view
Of course,
because
sir, of
I
course.
don't have an expert view on environmental economics.
No, we are actually talking about it in a very generic point of view,
Sure.
especially for students who write these type of answers and who understand it, especially when students take different concepts and
Yeah.
do not integrate them. So this is a nice way to explain them that these all topics are integrated, and
Yeah.
we have to learn them all in a bigger perspective. So yeah. Um, so another tricky one, I would say, is prisoner's dilemma.
Yeah.
Now, so prisoner's dilemma has been a major breakthrough, and we all agree to it in the field of, let's say, welfare economics. But when there are strategists and there are economists who have worked a lot of games in the prisoner's dilemma concept, and they found in the recent studies that, and many of us also would think about it, that the idea of prisoner's dilemma might be a little misleading when actually the game is played, and if one thinks that, okay, one can actually manage to mutually cooperate. This mutual cooperation might be misleading in the context when we are talking about competition. We are talking about various firms competing against each other. Is there a delusion? This, I would not say this is a delusional concept, because this has been, of course, a breakthrough, and like any other concept in economics, this has been something out of the brainstorming that must have been done. But yes, in the recent times, if we talk about, what is your take? Do you agree to the recent studies where strategists are finding newer things, that firms are now competing more aggressively with each other, um, and
Yeah.
there's
Yeah.
no mutual consensus, and there's nothing like win-win situation. At least one firm or one party has to win. So what is your take on this, again, an abstract idea of prisoner's dilemma?
So, prisoner's dilemma, basically, let's summarize for a few people, is that everyone, I always said this right at the, in response to your first question.
Mhm.
Individuals work on individual good,
Yeah, yeah.
and it is for the, and there is a something called as common good,
Yes.
social good and
Social
individual
objective.
good.
Yes.
There's a social objective, there's an individual objective.
Right, right.
To me, at least the way I look at management is the ability of a person to bridge these.
Hmm.
How do you make sure that individual good and common social good are both compatible with each other? So that to me is the primary question. So to me, therefore, I would not actually argue that prisoner's dilemma is a breakthrough or anything like that.
Okay.
Prisoner's dilemma is something that people have observed from
Hmm.
ages. It's articulated, let's say, in 1930s
Right.
when certain psychologists and economists were discussing
Hmm.
at one of the universities in US, I think Stanford, and they said that this is probably how the how the society behaves, etc., etc.
Nice work. Huh.
And you have things like problem of commons. You have so many other derivatives of prisoner's dilemma that have been invented over a span of time. Okay, so I don't think that prisoner's dilemma, first of all, is a breakthrough.
Hmm.
The prisoner's dilemma is like gravity. Gravity always existed. Somebody
We
articulated about
just
it.
observed it.
Prisoner's dilemma existed. People articulated it.
Right.
This argument that I actually think was very well done by the greater breakthrough, I actually think, is what happened, in a research that showed when do people cooperate in business
Hmm.
study.
Hmm.
Does that make sense? When do people actually cooperate? To me,
Yeah.
that's a very interesting finding.
Yeah.
Robert Axelrod's study that came out, which showed that there are strategies of cooperation in
Mm.
an infinitely repeated prisoner's dilemma. What's the meaning of an infinitely repeated prisoner's dilemma? I actually believe in future for a foreseeable. I actually believe in future.
Mm.
Simple. So
Yeah.
when do you cooperate with your fellow individuals? So this is where I actually tell my students, when do you expect cooperation among people who report to you?
When you
Not
know the
when they
future.
believe that, not when they believe that their future is ending.
True.
Only when they believe that their future is safe.
Safe.
So therefore, one of the first ways in which you restructure an organization where
Mm.
a private incentive and common incentive become aligned with each other is that you establish pathways where people see long-term future in your organization.
Mm.
When do people compete with each other aggressively?
Mm.
When do nations fight? Okay, I think we can get into using
Of
prisons as
course. Yes.
branch out into 20,000 different things.
True.
Let me give a couple of illustrations. When do people actually become more aggressive? The more they see their future to be dwindling, the more aggressive they become.
Yes.
You've got to say that tomorrow exists, or if you were a James Bond fan, you would say tomorrow never dies.
Yes.
Okay, only in that particular case will you cooperate. If you know that the
Mm.
world is ending tomorrow, why would you cooperate?
Yeah.
Again, there's a particular branch of of science which talks about. I won't even call it science, theology, if you will. So many other things that will tell
Mm-hmm.
you why you should be good for the sake of being good. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
I'm not getting into that. That's to me a
Mm.
little bit of an unsustainable behavior. You're nice, you're cooperating with each other because you see some kind of a future coming through.
Mm. Mm.
And so therefore, what is it that you can see or why people cooperate? Basically, on
Cooperate.
that horizon. So I was giving a talk at one of to a bunch of armed forces people, right?
Yeah.
Commanders of Indian Navy. I was invited to go out to talk to at Indian Naval War College,
Right.
and my statement there was I don't believe that technological superiority ever led to war. It's the economic uncertainty that you see in a
Mm.
country that leads to war. So please don't hope for your rival countries' economies to tank.
Mm.
Because when they do, the effect is not just in that country, the effect is on your
It
country
will be.
because there's going to be a skirmish at the border. To me,
That's
why is it that
absolutely.
firms are becoming more aggressive nowadays? Because of what we're seeing. If you look at it from a point that you touched upon, but I refuse to comment at a technical detail, which is environment.
Mm-hmm.
Environmental crisis is making time horizon shorter.
Mm.
Long run time horizons simply don't seem to exist,
Yeah.
right? What is it that are making nations tense? Few more coronaviruses, and I think every country in the world is saying essentially, uh, let me grab as much as I can
Mm.
before we end ourselves.
Mm.
So therefore, there is a problem out there.
Mm.
Correct? Why is it
Correct.
that you see that a particular corporation exists? I sense long-term behavior. I am not
Mm.
sensing short-term end to the relationship that people have.
Mm.
To me, it's a very important understanding that we'll have to develop. There's another reason why people cooperate in a business
Mm.
dialogue.
Yeah.
Imagine I'm playing this game with my wife or with my son.
Mm.
My son, 9-year-old guy. I would probably end up cooperating with these two entities that we're talking about. Correct? That's because I have a completely different view of life as
Yeah.
far as I'm concerned. My
Yeah.
happiness is completely different from theirs.
Of
We
course.
have a program here called Armed Forces Program where we teach retired armed forces
Mm-hmm.
um, in the way to join civilian life. I had so many chats with these armed forces people
Mm.
over, very informal chats, both in
Yeah.
classroom and off the classroom
Mm.
on prisoners' dialogue.
Mm.
To me, their entire argument is we'll always cooperate with our classmates. We are taught to cooperate with our classmates. We are ordered to cooperate with our classmates.
Mm.
So, the relationship, the entire set of, lifestyle that these guys lead is triggering and culminating in a point of them talking about us and not talking about me.
Mm.
So therefore,
True.
there is so why is it that they go through so many bonding exercises?
Yes.
So that this entire concept of me vanishes. And the concept of you and I together as single entity gets reinforced.
Establishes.
So therefore,
Yes.
how do you actually think of cooperation happening over a period? One, when
Mm.
you and I believe that we are going to continue to engage in a conversation over a period of few years,
Yeah.
or that we actually believe that I have so much empathy for you that you feeling happy is somehow making me feel happy, and me feeling happy, and I'm convinced that me feeling happy is making you feel happy.
Yeah.
Then in that case, we will cooperate.
Cooperate.
So therefore, what's the argument? What's the lesson we are taking away from Prisoner's Dilemma? To me, Prisoner's Dilemma is not a breakthrough. It's a
Mm.
beautiful articulation of a phenomenon that you observe out there. But the
Mm.
argument of changing the game, which is what we're doing when my wife and I are playing a particular game, right?
Yeah.
Um, and to me, this view of long-term time horizon,
Hmm.
these two are to me fantastic insights that you can take pretty much anywhere. Don't ever wish for your rival country's economies to tank.
Mm.
That's not good for you.
Very, I believe, I would say that it's very well articulated by you. I think we here get a much bigger perspective than just the concept. Because when we read in articles or maybe in books, especially in books, it's just the theory. It's nothing. Where did it start? How did it start? Why did it start? And then there is nothing like why is it? Uh, how
I
will
must
it get
argue
concluded?
you
Yes,
should read the right books. I think.
yes, of course. Yes, of course. That is another argument that we all make as uh,
I'm happy to give quite a few non-technical books that people can read on this subject, but we'll do it towards the end of it.
sure, sure, sir, sure, sir. Okay, so now concluding with this discussion, there's this last question that there is, and it is about market structure, another concept in microeconomics as we study. In market structure or in markets with repeated purchases, firms sometimes engage in price discrimination, which is well known, based on consumers' past purchase. Now, sir, can we see this in the light of asymmetrical information, which is quoted by George Econoff? Um, because asymmetrical information, which would definitely then mean that people and or two parties not knowing many things of each other, and then revenue generation or profit generation can happen if there is a lot of asymmetry in that information. So can we relate to it, or can we possibly in the future um, find more about it, research more about it, especially when students are concerned?
Okay.
Yeah, what is your take, and what
Yeah.
is your take on this in a generic perspective?
Yeah. First of all, let me start this out that my PhD was on price discrimination. So
Wow.
therefore, I really do enjoy this particular question. Many people assumed that internet would be the death knell of price discrimination. Why? Because any product that you're purchasing, there's no asymmetric information anymore in the market out there. First of all,
Mhm.
the asymmetric information that Akerlof talks about and the asymmetric information that people who do research on price discrimination is in
Yeah.
one two different, or maybe they are same at some level, right? I mean, except that Akerlof goes into adverse selection, price
Yeah.
discrimination is not much
Mm-hmm.
on adverse selection part of it. Having gotten that record straight,
Yeah.
many people assume that internet would mean that firms actually will simply not be able to price discriminate. Why? Because, well, you get all the information out there, you go to the cheapest source, you buy stuff. But there is a flip side to it.
Mm-hmm.
What internet ended up doing is that it started giving producer more information about you,
Mm-hmm.
which they can
Absolutely.
exploit to even micro price discriminate,
Mm.
right? Even at a minor level. What's the battle that is winning right now? I believe it's the second argument that's winning the battle.
Yeah.
More producers know about you. So again, people when people talk about discrimination in a strategy,
Mm.
people always concentrate on price, and that's wrong. A product has several attributes,
Mm.
correct? And price is
Correct.
one of the attributes of the product.
Only one. Yes.
Only one attribute of the product. So therefore, while discrimination may or may not happen at a price level, There is so much of discrimination happening on the other 6 or 7 attributes that a product has. Quality is an attribute of the product.
Very correct, Indeed.
Recommendations of the purchases
Yeah.
is another attribute of the product.
Yes.
Correct, packaging. There's so many attributes of the product.
Right.
So price discrimination in an economics class is used as an umbrella for all kinds of discrimination. And
Understanding
that's
all
an
things.
abstraction I guess many students miss.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I think this is where I have a problem with some of the teaching of microeconomics. Sorry for being very blunt about it, but that's it. Discrimination is a word that is applicable on so many dimensions, and I think that's something that the students have to look at. I change quality. That is discrimination. I change packaging. I change the temperature, of the refrigeration that I have for my products between two superstores that I actually maintain. That is discrimination.
Right.
So there are several attributes of the word discrimination. I tell you, I prompt you towards the two products when you purchased, let's say, a product on online.
Yeah.
Recommendations are different between you and different, and I.
Yeah.
That is also a kind of a discrimination.
True.
Right? Surcharge, surge price.
Yes.
If you think about discrimination right now, it opens a completely different can. If you think about discrimination broadly from a product strategy standpoint, it opens a huge can of worms, and you see it everywhere. So, a producer is getting to be able to discriminate on multiple dimensions thanks to the availability of information about you. And again, did price discrimination actually vanish? No. No. Many people thought that information is a cool thing that reduces inequalities and so many other things. Here's a very interesting study that I read somewhere. So many people thought that CEOs make obscenely large amount of salaries when compared to an average worker in a firm. Correct? So therefore, many people assume that if we force the companies to publish CEO salary information, this wage gap will reduce because many CEOs will feel ashamed at the wage gap that exists between the bottommost and themselves, and therefore they will agree. But it led to something completely different. What is the outcome? I suddenly know that I'm not the highest paid CEO in the world. So I'm not the most valued CEO. Therefore, it went and it did a completely different thing. It ratcheted up the salaries of CEOs even further. Therefore, the wage gap that you're talking about has further increased in the recent time. Right. Information, many people believe, will solve all the problems. I actually believe differently. Information is a double-edged sword. It can be used by you. It can be used by your opponent.
Yeah.
It's the first thing that one should understand as far as strategy economics classes are concerned. Don't ever assume that having all information in the world will solve all your problems. It won't. You also have to process that information. Then, therefore, discrimination will happen at the person who has greater processing ability.
Yeah.
You as a consumer will think of one product. I as a producer have an entire battalion who is working on product analytics for me.
Yeah.
If I don't have it, I'll outsource that particular work and get a consulting team to give me those analytics.
Of course.
No question about it. So therefore, information works much better in the hand of a person who is able to process that information. So therefore, to assume that information will solve all your problems, discrimination will vanish, and asymmetric information will therefore go away in the long run, no, that's moonshine as far as I'm concerned. That doesn't happen.
Right.
There will be more ingenuous ways of gathering information. There are more, ingenious ways of processing information. There are going to be more creative ways of making use of the processed information.
Wow.
That's my take on, on the so-called depth of asymmetric information. No, it's not going to happen anytime soon. Firms are going to figure out very subtle ways of differentiating. I wouldn't want to use the word discrimination all the time. It has a negative connotation. Differentiating between various kinds of consumers.
Sir, thank you so much. I think it was really insightful that you answered all the questions so candidly, but in a very, very simplistic manner. Because when we approach game theory, when we approach especially the empirical part, or when we try to understand the application part of this side of welfare economics, it becomes complex. Not in understanding, but actually, like you said, processing. We have a lot of information, but the processing part might get maybe missing somewhere. So thank you so much for doing that for us and for our students, because this makes us gain a lot of bigger perspective into what we are actually reading, what we are learning, what books we are reading, and how we are processing that knowledge that we are gaining, why things have to be integrated, why things have to be learned simultaneously and not individually, you know. I think it was fantastic to have had a conversation with you. And
Thank
towards the end, I would ask you to say a few encouragement words for the students of Ecoholics, and actually all the students across there who are listening to this
you.
conversation.
Okay, let me, since this is going to be on public domain,
Yeah.
I would like to make one disclaimer very clear that I've already made at the beginning. I'm not a game theorist by research. I just have a good understanding and a working understanding of this particular subject, and I find it very fascinating to teach my students. So, that's how, somehow, as I say, I have to figure out a way to make a living.
It is
So,
all sheer modesty, sir.
no, no,
And
it's not. It's not actually. I know my strengths very well, so therefore, I'm being very candid about that too. I mean, that's neither here nor there, by the way. I've said what I've said, and I stand by what I've said without any
right.
question. So therefore, yeah. The second part to all the students, I would only actually have to argue this.
Mhm.
That I've said something about rational individual not being true, etc., etc. But I'd also like to add some perspective around that particular comment
Sure.
as my parting word to all of you guys. Assuming that people are stupid and therefore justifying a particular behavior is probably the most condescending thing that you could do. Assume people are rational and still figure out their incentives on why they behave in a particular way. That's the right thing to do. Of course, stupidity is an answer for anything. It's a question of how you're behaving in a very strategic way and you're still behaving the way you're behaving
Right.
is where I think the crux lies. So therefore, my question, my challenge to all of you, if you will, my parting word to all of you here would be: think. Don't get condescending. Don't make assumptions. Don't think. Why is it that people are behaving the way they are behaving? Why is it that organizations are behaving the way they are behaving? Why is it that nations are behaving the way they are behaving? Think about it. Nobody is doing it because they are stupid or they don't know what they're doing. They're doing it because of a particular strategic intent. Maybe their assumptions are right, maybe their assumptions are wrong, but they are working with a particular strategic intent. Saying that some of them are stupid is being condescending, and being condescending is probably the greatest sin you can commit. So, therefore, to me, students of economics or students who generally are interested in economics, either ways, I don't care. The whole argument is open your eyes and look at the world straight in its face to figure out some meaning in what you're observing out there. And I would assume that that journey could be highly satisfying. But to me, when you're reading a newspaper article, when you're reading a news item, when you're just reading a stray article here and there, think about what the intent behind that particular person is. And then you'll know that you become, as a result of it, more discerning individual. You become more interesting individual to talk to. That's my. I've also said that I'll let you know one or two books that I actually found very beneficial.
Of
Um,
course.
one of the books that I found to be a fascinating read, and it has a lot of influence on how I teach my classes, is this book called The Art of Strategy by these two gentlemen, Avinash Dikshit at Princeton and Barry Nailbuff at Yale University. I think it has had a lot of influence on the way I had modeled my thinking about
Mhm.
game theory. I mean, for the more advanced students, there are textbooks, standard textbooks on game theory that one could follow. Several of them. I know there is Watson, there is Gibbons, there is Pindick and not Pindick and Rubin. That's a microeconomics textbook. I'm sorry.
Microeconomics.
Yeah. So there is Osborne.
Mm.
So many versions. Freudenberg and Tirol probably will be the ultimate classic, but
Mm.
do attempt it if you're technically very very savvy, right? So that's my take on it. But Barry Nilbuff and Avinash Dikshit and Barry Nilbuff book, The Art of Strategy, I think could be a very nice reading that you could read for 15, 20 minutes or half an hour before you go to bed. And I'm sure
Mm.
your bedtime would be delayed significantly because that's how captivating the book was for me when I initially read it.
Mm.
Found it to be mind-boggling. And there are several other, good books that you should be looking at that cite this particular book, but keep your mind open.
Mm.
You don't need a textbook for game theory. There is game theory that's being produced day in and day out,
Yeah.
right? So that's my final words, I guess, on the topic. And no, thanks for inviting me over. I find this to be a very nice privilege, if you will, to be able to talk to your students. Um, and my professional hazard is you got to stop me from speaking. Speaking is never a problem, right? I mean, that's how I make my living. So therefore, it's not a problem at all. Yeah.
Thank you so much, sir. It was actually a privilege listening to you. Our students are going to have a lot of takeaways and insights from the various things that you have quoted, the various things, and the various things that you have actually simplified in a very, very generic way so that the students can gain a lot of knowledge from it. Thank you so much for your
My
time
pleasure.
and thank you for coming on our channel. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you very much.